Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's a week today, isn't it? So things are getting closer, and yet I wonder whether you're getting more confused as time goes on. I know that I am. I'd like today to invite you to call me and just answer the simplest of questions that seems to have fallen by the wayside during all of the toing and froing of electoral campaigning and the profoundly unexpected shift in fortunes for the two-party leaders. The more we think about yesterday's programme, the more we concluded afterwards. Well, I'm saying we, I'm not the Queen, but I suspect if you're anything like me, the more you concluded afterwards was that actually part of the reason for Jeremy Corbyn's supposed surge is that he started from such an astonishingly low point in the public perception. Not to take anything away from him, but it could hardly have got any worse for him. And actually, conversely, Theresa May's lead was so epic that things could hardly have got better. Well, they certainly haven't. But here's the question that we seem to have forgotten, and it should really be the most important question of all. I want you to tell me why you think we are having a general election. Seriously, I'll take any answer you've got. I occasionally suggest that it might be more interesting for people listening if people who don't ring in usually ring in. And I think today's possibly one of those days. I don't necessarily need to be reminded of the fairly well-rehearsed and hackneyed theories that are in circulation, and I'd love just to hear yours. Why do you think Theresa May called this general election? Why do you think we are having this general election? I know what the official line is, and the official line is something that we're reminded of today, as you just heard in the bulletins. The Prime Minister will today attempt to move the debate back towards Brexit, but I mean, she hasn't said anything about Brexit. Why has it moved away from Brexit? The election was called, she said, because of Brexit, because somehow she needed to strengthen her mandate before going into negotiations. I don't quite understand. Well, I didn't understand at the time, I'm not going to lie to you, and arguably I understand even less now. That there can't really, can there, have been an opinion in Downing Street that they could do even better in the polls than they were doing at the moment she called the election? Did they just think it was an open goal and things could only get worse? So that epic 20-plus point lead was the absolute high point. And, of course, Gordon Brown's big mistake in 2008 or 9 was not to go to the country early when the polls suggested that he was riding high. You just think somebody would be whispering into somebody's ear, why are we doing this? And it's hard to get answers, isn't it? Well, it's hard to get answers from politicians at all. I'll show you what happened when Theresa May bowled up with a local newspaper journalist in a minute. It's an almost textbook example of just how pointless a lot of these political encounters have become. And if like me, you're a little tired of the sort of tripwire style of questioning, I have to remind you that the reason why people try and employ tripwires by asking sort of fairly silly, simplistic questions about, I don't know, the price of eggs or whatever it may be, is because the politicians now have their guards up in such a sort of weaponized epic fashion that it's hard to get anything past them except these cheeky little inquiries. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. But why are we doing it? Why do you think we're doing it? Why do you think, whatever your political loyalties might be, why do you think we are having a general election? I don't know. I just don't know. A big enough majority in the House of Commons to get pretty much any legislation she wanted through. A Labour Party that rolled over and played ball on Article 50. I don't get it. Why are we having a general election? I know it's a little bit unfashionable sometimes to step back and ask big questions instead of piling in on the little ones about, was the audience that Comres, the opinion pollsters carefully selected last night, was it biased? Because there didn't seem to be as many racists in the audience as usual. I'd say, yeah, it was. Racists seemed to be appallingly underrepresented in last night's BBC audience. But I want the big question, why are we having this general election? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. And I would cautiously suggest I can't see us having much of a ding-dong on this. So if you haven't phoned me before and you quite fancy the idea of getting involved, you're profoundly politically engaged, and you've perhaps relatively recently stumbled upon this radio station that ministers to your needs so effectively, but you haven't yet broken your duck, I think today would be a great time to do it, because I want as many answers to this question as possible on the board. Why are we having a general election? Well, what do you think the private conversations involved? Why now? Why now? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I think the answer is going to be multifarious, isn't it? It's going to be hopefully one of those hours where we get loads and loads of answers and realise that they all speak a little bit of truth to the question. There isn't going to be a single theory, but why are we having a general election? It's going to cost tens of millions of pounds, if not hundreds of millions of pounds, to have a general election. And I mean, if she doesn't come back with a massively enhanced majority, it's going to be even harder to justify retrospectively the decision to throw it in the first place. But I'll begin not retrospectively. We'll begin sort of reactively and just simply address the question of why we are having a general election. Especially, and forgive me if this seems a little skewed, but by all means ring in and redress the balance. You know, yesterday when she was asked why she wasn't going to do the leaders' debate, Theresa May said she's too busy thinking about the Brexit negotiations. So Jeremy Corbyn says unexpectedly, he plays, I thought, quite a clever move. It wasn't that flipping clever. He's not exactly Machiavelli, but still, he said, yeah, we'll go to Cambridge, we'll do the debate. She got asked why she wasn't going to go, and she said, well, unlike Jeremy Corbyn, I'm too busy thinking about the Brexit negotiations to go on television and have a debate. And I thought, hang on a minute. You called the election. How can you simultaneously argue that you can't go on a leaders' debate in an election campaign that you've made entirely focused upon leadership because you're too busy thinking about the Brexit negotiations and you don't want to be distracted from them, despite the fact that you're the person who called the actual general election that's distracted the whole country from Brexit negotiations, which start about 10 days after the actual election finishes? Genuinely, sometimes this happens when I start down a line, and I haven't really thought it through in advance. Because I like the question, why do you think we're having a general election? Phone lines are full. Actually, get rid of line 3. She wants to talk about T-shirts. That's got no place on this programme. Not yet, anyway. I genuinely now find myself almost wondering whether there's something sinister under... How can you say, in the same breath, the person who called the election doesn't and has made it about leadership doesn't want to have a debate with the other leaders because she's too busy thinking about Brexit? Go on, riddle me this. 0345 6060 973. And if you're wondering why I haven't been offered any opportunity whatsoever to ask her these questions myself, I'll show you why. Because there's no earthly way on earth I'd put up with this.
Prime Minister, welcome to Plymouth.
Thank you.
We're in one of the most marginal seats in the country here. This is your second visit of the campaign. Are you getting nervous, and do you see Plymouth as a must-win next week?
Now, I'm very clear that this is a crucial election for this country. We stand at an important moment. We need to ensure we get the Brexit negotiations right, but also have a plan to take this country forward, to build a stronger, more prosperous future for Plymouth, for families here, and across the whole of the United Kingdom. And so I'm going out and about around the whole country, talking to people with that very clear message that they face a choice on the 8th of June.
Plymouth's a very proud armed forces city. We're seeing the closure of our naval barracks, the sale of HMS Ocean, 42 Commando taken out of service. Can you guarantee our armed forces families that they will be protected from further cuts?
I'm very clear that Plymouth has a proud record of connection with the armed forces. And when I was last here in Plymouth earlier in the campaign, I was able to sit down with some members of the armed forces and talk to them about the issues that matter to them. And what became very clear was about the importance of Plymouth too. But what I want to do, what we will do as a government, is ensuring that we're giving more help to our armed forces, and we're supporting them. Last week, I was at NATO talking about UK defence and how we can work with others to ensure...
So this poor lad is it the Plymouth Herald? I like the cut of his jib, actually. He wrote a little article on his way back to the office. He said, I've never interviewed a Prime Minister before. And then he said, in this little article, he said, I'm still not sure whether I have or not. Because he just effectively said, what's your favourite cake? And she said, I think it's very important to remember that biscuits are a crucial part of our morning coffee diet. And then he said, Prime Minister, what do you think of the weather? And she said, I'm very fond of swimming. And then he said, Prime Minister, could you please talk me through your recipe for... I don't know, shepherd's pie. And she said, it is quite clear to me that penguins are the best chocolate biscuits. They're just unbelievable. And I think it's the fault of my profession. I think we're going to have a recalibration, aren't we, in the coming years, where you just can't can't carry on like this. You can't just do journalists. You can't just do soft interviews with people who throw you underarm balls that you're allowed to just block and block and block. And I like that journalist there because he's expressed his utter sort of disillusionment. They weren't even tricky questions. It's the second time you've been here, Prime Minister. Does that mean that this is a crucial constituency? Does that mean things are looking a bit wobbly? Well, yes, obviously the polls are not ideal at this point. I don't put too much faith in polls, but I wouldn't want anybody in Plymouth to think that I consider their future to be less important than any other constituency in this country. In fact, given the presence of the naval base, given the proud military tradition of this constituency, I could make a case, if I had to, John, for suggesting that Plymouth is more important than any other constituency in this country. And that is why it's not hard to do this stuff. Make it all about leadership, but don't go to the leaders' debate. Then, to make things even worse, Amber Rudd, who I thought acquitted herself quite impressively last night in the face of epic adversity, I discovered this morning is grieving the passing of her father. So Theresa May sent Amber Rudd to go and essentially take a public kicking that she didn't have the confidence to do herself, while the passing of her dad is still very, very fresh in the memory. I mean, what does that tell you about a person, whether they're in politics or not? If your boss had to go in front of the board next week and then decided actually that he couldn't face it, God, we've got some pretty tough figures. We've had some pretty rubbish figures. They say, Chris, you go and talk to the board. I say, Caroline, can you go and talk to the board? And then someone whispers in your ear, you know, she's just lost her dad, don't you? Oh, don't care. Send her to do the debate. Send her to do the leaders' debate. So, as I see it right now, just sort of stepping back from the whole fray, I am not interested in who you're going to vote for or which party's doing well or which party's doing badly. I want to know why we're having this flipping election. 2 weeks out from starting the most important political negotiation since the end of the Second World War. What are we actually playing at? Answer, it was called by a woman who insists that it's all about Brexit but won't tell us anything at all about what Brexit is going to look like. Okay? It has been steered by that woman towards the economy. You've got to look at the costings. Look at the Labour costings. And she's published a manifesto which contains no costings whatsoever. And finally, it's all about leadership. It's all about leadership. Would you like to come to the leadership debate? No. I'm going to send a colleague who is currently grieving the passing of her father. Why, in your words, are we having this election at all? I don't know if I've ever asked you a simpler question, but I suspect it doesn't admit many simple answers. Why are we having this election? 0345 6060 973. Start with Alan, who's in Bexley. Alan, what would you like to say?
Oh, crumbs. You caught me by surprise, James.
Because you were expecting another verbose 7 minutes of my brilliant analysis, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, bad luck, mate. Fill your boots.
Great show as always, James. I think she had a majority, only a slim majority though, 17 seats or whatever it was, and I think it's down to a case of there's lots of other very controversial legislation that she wants to push through. Things like things that she couldn't get through before, like selling the UK land registry, profit-making organisation.
But the only circumstances in which that sort of stuff doesn't get through is if Conservative MPs vote against it.
There are some that wouldn't, because there wasn't a three-line whip on that. So
no, I don't know.
Get through the last lot of voting. England's state-owned forests, she wants to sell those. She's voted in favour of that. And the Naylor report, asset stripping the NHS, selling off all of its buildings and land and everything else. They're not going to get that through unless they've got a massive majority. So you're going for quite. I mean, you haven't mentioned Brexit, oddly, despite the fact that she insists this election is all about breakfast, but breakfast, all about Brexit. So you're going for quite a sinister analysis. You're suggesting that there is a kind of ideological desire. The stories aren't sinister.
Well, I'm just making sure I've understood you correctly. The sinister subtext would be that they want to do some seriously potentially damaging, ideologically very right-wing things, and she won't get that past elements of her own party unless the majority is enormous.
Exactly. Yeah. My point is that. Another thing, for example, brushing Leveson under the carpet, not going through with Leveson phase 2. Yes, it's in the manifesto.
Dave, it doesn't need to be voted on, though. She's already effectively done that. That's it, you know, there's...
Well, yeah, but you do have to have a vote on the repealing Section 40 of the Crime and Courts Act 2013.
What's this fella doing on my show? He's far too well informed. How am I going to ride roughshod over him with my with my own cutting sound bites?
And can I also just point out that they got that date of that act wrong in the manifesto. They put it down as 2014, so their manifesto, they got a number wrong.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
that'll be leading the BBC News for the next day and a half, won't it?
Yeah,
I suspect. So there's no positive. So okay, then, just accommodate this into your analysis if you can. Why the ostensibly rather unconservative big marquee announcements on social care and insurance, national insurance?
I think these are things that I think they realise that they also need to do. And the reason, you know, it's not costed. They don't put figures on there. They're not actually telling people how far they're going to go with this. And they're thinking if they do it as vague as possible, then no one will notice. And they'll just say, oh, okay, fair enough. You know, there are things we've got to do. We've got to all tighten our belt a little bit. There's also parts in the old manifesto. For example, in 2015 manifesto, they stated they wouldn't increase national insurance. Now, in this manifesto, they haven't mentioned anything about it. They haven't said whether they will or whether they won't. But because it's not in the manifesto, it's not a manifesto promise to not increase it, that gives them carte blanche to increase what they like.
So the real reason why she called the election has absolutely nothing to do with the reasons that she's given us, and surprisingly little to do with Brexit, although it's all going to unfold against a Brexit backdrop, and it is sort of hard right, free market, all the things that she says she isn't, you think she is?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's one. No, you're on the board.
If you look at what's happened with her voting record, and you say she's coming across as not being hard right, but if you look at her voting record on how she's voted as an MP in her entire career, everything in there is hard right.
Okay, that's right. Alan was first. If you don't know what Alan said, don't get mad, get even. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Mark's in Pimlico. Why are we having an election, Mark?
Well, the main reason I believe is that something's going to happen in the near future. I think there's sort of 15 members of Parliament, the Conservatives, that are under investigation for expenses scandal. That's going to come out, which is going to rock the government.
There's only
but
one.
More importantly, yeah, I mean that's
no. The CPS have revealed that there's only one constituency left under investigation. All the others are those investigations are over.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still an investigation. There's no smoke without fire, as far as I'm concerned. But
but also, just I mean, all right. There's no saying silly things on the radio without being corrected, as far as I'm concerned. What you just said is categorically and completely wrong.
Okay,
all right, good.
That's just what I've heard, and I understand that, and I agree with you. Also, this Brexit is a poison chalice. Whoever wins this general election will take us through Brexit. We are not going to get I was listening to your programme the other day, you know, a bad result, a good result, no result.
Shake it all about. Yes. But why? So what? Is she trying to pass that? You think she wants to lose so that the poison chalice gets passed to someone else, or?
Well, basically what's going to happen is whoever wins is going to say it was the other party that didn't do this, the other party didn't do that, whoever it may be, Tory, Labour, Liberal, UKIP, if they exist after this general election. It's just a poison chalice, and we, as the general public, are going to go against any decision that's going to be made. We've got 2 years of Brexit, gerrymandering and negotiations. I mean, yeah, I'm
going to say something rude, but I don't want you to get offended, because I'm in exactly the same. I mean, except for the fact that I present the show and you phoned it, you haven't got a clue why we're having an election, mate, any more than I have. You just thought you did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, where does that come from? Where does that come from?
You've been listening to the programme too much. Too much false confidence. I don't know why we're having an election. I genuinely don't know why we're having an election. I do this for a living. Why do you think we're having an election? 0345 6060 973. Mark, mind how you go. Paul, Elstree, what do you want to say?
Hi, James, first-time caller. I love the show.
Good man.
Yeah, I've been racking my brains as well. And I come to the very unsolid conclusion, maybe, this is all about Theresa May that she never received a mandate when she took over Prime Minister position from Cameron. And maybe from both a professional and a personal point of view, she needs this election, or she thought she needed it, because she got into power very quickly and very easily and with a clear, huge majority, to boost their own self-esteem, both professionally and personally. I'm guessing here, but I'm racking my brains because I thought to myself, well, here's a country with millions and billions of pounds of debt. It doesn't need the extra cost of a general election. No. So what is it all about?
Yes.
And when you look at her and you hear her when she's in debates and she doesn't want to go on one-on-ones in a debate that isn't unscripted beforehand, and I think to myself, she seems really unsure of herself. She seems very nervous when she's questioned by even the basic of journalists. We spoke about that guy in Plymouth as well. I think to myself, does she need a personal boost here, James? Is this what it's all about?
Well, it's not working out very well if that's what it is all about, is it?
But I don't know, James. It's almost like I'm thinking to myself now, I'm trying to find the real reason why this election is being called. And people put up loads of different reasons.
Yeah.
Is it Brexit? Is it about it's the best time to go to the electorate because the Conservatives thought they were going to get an easy run through.
They still might secure. Ladbrokes has just announced that the projected majority has gone below 100 for the first time since the election was called. But most of the polling, it still makes for fairly positive reading until you compare it to where the polling was a week ago. That's the only circumstance in which it still doesn't look like a good result. So a lot of this may be premature.
James, I thought you made a really good point when you first came on. That they couldn't have gone much higher in the ratings in any case, and Labour couldn't have gone much lower. So that gap was almost naturally was going to be sort of narrowed automatically. And also the other thing, I know you've spoken of this before, James. I've only started listening to you in the last couple of weeks. Is that almost this is a dual election angle from the two different parties. One party wants to make this about personalities and how ineffective the other leader is, and the other party wants to make it about what is really going on in the high street, what common men and women like you and I are probably worried about more, or can associate with more, which I suppose is the public services. I'd like to hear a question put in the polls directed to people is, do you think this election is about public services? Is it about Brexit, or is it about the individuals that are on the leadership roster at the moment?
Good grief. Yeah, that is a brilliant question. Almost a sort of vanity project in reverse as well, because trying to boost our own personal situation, focusing upon... listen, I mean, open the cavalcade of abuse now. Jeremy Corbyn is still a spectacularly unimpressive candidate in many, many ways, but it's a two-horse race. It's probably the first election in living memory that truly does offer you the sparkling choice of a rock or a hard place. And maybe that's partly why things are going in the way they're going. But I still don't know, and none of our callers really claim to know, but I enjoy sharing the confusion why we're having a general election. Paul, what a sparkling debut. Thank you, mate. It's 10:30. I like this. James is channeling the Prime Minister. The question I'm asking this morning is, why are we having this election? James in Maidenhead has replied, I think we have to be very clear that the government has always felt that it is important to start the day with a good breakfast, and most nutritionists would agree with me on that issue. My personal favourite is porridge with some honey. You think I'm exaggerating? This is, I played you the clip earlier of Mrs May in Plymouth, an interview with the Plymouth Herald. I'll just give you some of the highlights. 2 visits, this is the question. 2 visits in 6 weeks to one of the country's most marginal constituencies. Are you getting worried? Theresa May's answer, I'm very clear that this is a crucial election for this country. Okay, second question. Plymouth is feeling the effects of military cuts. Will you guarantee to protect the city from further pain? Answer, I'm very clear that Plymouth has a proud record of connection with the armed forces. Okay. Question, how will your Brexit plan make Plymouth better off? Answer, I think there is a better future ahead for Plymouth and for the whole of the UK. Yeah, this is surreal, right? I know that they're not supposed to ever answer questions properly, but to unanswer them or not answer them in quite such a cynical fashion is, to me, quite spectacular. I'm almost impressed. Question, will you promise to sort out our transport links? Answer, I'm very clear. That's 3 out of 4 answers that begin with the words, I'm very clear, and then go on to provide anything but clarity. That connectivity is hugely important for Plymouth and the South West generally. Okay. And that's all real. A few people wondering whether it's some sort of parody. No, it's all real. Why are we having this election? Does anybody actually know? This from Mike, who's in Gosport. We're having it now to postpone the almost inevitable defeat that would have come in 2020 when the Brexiteers become thoroughly disillusioned with the poor outcome of the EU negotiations. Mrs May is basically a Remainer and pre-referendum set out sound reasons why Brexit was a bad move. After Cameron fell on his sword and Boris self-destructed, she had to choose between power and principle. And we know which direction she went in. 2022, by contrast, will at least offer a 24-month reprieve and maybe some sort of Tory miracle. It's an answer. Charlotte's in Putney. Charlotte, have you got an answer? Why are we having an election?
Well, good morning, James. I just have to say, I've never called this programme before, and you are making me laugh out loud this morning. It's hilarious.
Well, in a good way. Well, you're not laughing at me. You're laughing with me.
No, I'm not. You're asking all the questions that everyone should be asking.
Oh, thank you.
As far as I'm concerned, it's the self-glorification of Theresa May. And when she became Prime Minister, I thought, gosh, we've got Captain Sensible in charge here.
Yes.
That's quite good.
That was the thing, wasn't it?
And within a nanosecond, she saw that 20-point lead, went for a walk up the mountain wherever she went, and decided that she would get a landslide. And has she actually considered, like the Trump thing, like Brexit, that she could fail, she could end up with less of a lead, she could actually not get in?
Well, I'm still unlikely looking at all the numbers, but actually your analysis is quite... I mean, it makes sense for her to have called the election under your analysis. The point that the lead was huge, to sort of cash it in, the chips, an opinion poll leader, just plastic chips. You want to cash them in and get the actual money.
She's got a job to do. She's got a major job to do. Someone's supposed to be running the country called the Prime Minister. She's supposed to be negotiating with Europe, which is jolly difficult. There's a huge security issue. There's leaders all over the world in chains, like France and America. She should be doing the job. And instead she's up and down the country eating chips. Going on and on and on.
Is she eating lots of chips?
I'm on her side. I was on her side.
Yes, clearly.
Like that. And I think Jeremy, who I'm not a fan of, is playing a blinder.
Why is he playing? By not doing much, or are you actually impressed by what you're seeing?
Across as a nice guy.
Yes.
He didn't take his wife on the one show. Mr. and Mrs. May went together and talked about the bins being put out.
Yes.
He sat there and came across as actually quite nice.
I did see that. I haven't seen a lot of the television coverage this campaign because, frankly, life's too short. But I did see his appearance on the one show, and he did come across as quite a nice fellow.
Quite pleasant.
Yes.
She's the one banging on about stability. She is putting us all into a bit more chaos, which we didn't need.
But if she comes back from the country with a majority of, let us say, for the sake of argument, 50 or 60 seats, which would still be fairly low on the expectation scale for the Conservatives pre-calling the election, but they'd probably take it now if they were offered it, then we're all right, aren't we? And we can see why she did it.
Any difference to the Brexit negotiations? Does anyone in Europe care less what her majority is? It doesn't make a piece of difference.
But what about back here, when Parliament does actually get a vote on whatever deal it is we come back with, and if she's got really obstreperous backbenchers who want Brexit to be even harder than it needs to be, they could hold her Brexit boat below the waterline.
It's about negotiation. Westminster's supposed to be a place of opposition, not just a pushover. And we need to have people there who are querying this ridiculous Brexit and querying what terms we're going to get it on, not just some railroad thing that she's going to produce.
Well, I'd say you've been on a journey, haven't you, since she called this election?
I'm really angry with her. I'm really angry with her.
And that's going to be...
manifesto. She's putting out a manifesto. The public don't want to read it. They don't read it anyway. They don't understand it. And the next day she changes it. It's impossible to understand what's going on.
And you would probably not object to the description historically of being a fairly staunch Conservative, Charlotte, or not?
Absolutely.
Well, I tell you what, there'll be ears ringing at Downing Street right now. You are their worst nightmare. Did you realise that?
I'm going to probably be an abstainer. I'm a total nightmare, yes, because she's really annoyed me. She should be running the country, doing what she says, being stable, and letting us all get on with our lives and doing a good job.
And also, when asked why she wasn't going to do the debate last night, and Jeremy Corbyn was, she said, I'm too busy thinking about the Brexit negotiations to appear on television, to which there's only one response. Why did you call an election?
She's not Superwoman. She can't do all these jobs. And she's becoming aggressive and standing out there in Downing Street shouting at Europe.
Yes.
But don't shout at Europe. You're not holding all the cards.
No.
Calm down. Be diplomatic.
Well, can I ask you one other thing? Because you've been a brilliant caller, I have to say. The Amber Rudd, and this is a very serious point, and we've had a giggle together, but let's be more sober for a moment. Amber Rudd lost her father 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Now, the defence will be, we asked her if she wanted to do it, and she said that she did. Should she even have been asked?
No, disgraceful. I'm a widow. I lost my parents, my husband. I know exactly what those feelings are like.
Yes.
And of course, you say, oh, yes, of course I'll go. And I think it would have been fantastic if Theresa May had said she was going to go. I'm going in her place. I'll be there, Jeremy.
I think you're probably right, actually, and it's interesting that you mention your own sort of family situation, because I think back to losing my dad not that long ago, and how quickly I wanted to come back to work and whether I felt ready for work, and my boss actually said, take a couple more days. I wanted to come back to work straight away, because the 3 hours I was on air are the only hours in the day when I wasn't thinking about my dad in a very maudlin way, but I wasn't ready to come back to work. And Amber Rudd is not me, or Charlotte. She is different, and obviously it is her decision and her choice, but it's an odd one to send someone into bat for you because you are, well, frit or too busy thinking about Brexit negotiations. Whatever the truth is, the person you send is the person who is mourning. Charlotte, what a lovely, sparkling debut. I look forward to your next appearance on the programme. 10:41 is the time. Tony is in Acton. Tony, why are we having an election?
Well, I think, James, that Theresa May got it absolutely right tactically. She was thinking ahead and thinking, oh, my God, my government has only got 2 more years, and the Brexit thing is going to be a complete...
2020 would be the next one.
2020,
yeah.
2 more years.
Yeah.
3 more years.
3 more years.
It's going to be a complete disaster. It's too short a time, because...
let me just pause you there, because nothing Theresa May has said or done suggests, since the result came in, nothing she has said or done since the result came in, since she became Prime Minister, suggests that she thinks Brexit is going to be a complete disaster. But you think that's part of her reasoning? My
view is that privately she thinks it's going to be a complete disaster. Okay. And therefore she made a political decision. It's going to be turning out to be disastrous, I believe. But she made the decision. I think there's going to be such an outcry from the electorate about the dire consequences of the...
When reality dawns, as it were.
When reality dawns, a good phrase, yes. When reality dawns, she's looking ahead and thinking, oh my God, how can we deal with this massive backlash? And the way to deal with it is to buy another 5 years. And the way to do that, and get rid of the 3 years, is to buy 5 years by taking advantage of what she thought was a massive electoral lead over the opposition right now, the perceived weakness of Jeremy Corbyn. And it is only a perception, because he's proving to be quite a good candidate in the pre-election discussions.
He's having a good campaign.
I think he is, yeah. So that it was basically fear.
Yeah.
The fear of having to do... let's be honest, she was a Remainer until about a few weeks ago.
Yes. Still hasn't really explained why she isn't anymore. Hasn't really explained whether she isn't anymore, actually.
Absolutely.
So I get sent a phrase, you'll like this, actually, Tony. I get sent a text, Brexit means Brexit, why don't you pay attention? And I laugh at it. I presume it's a joke, but I have this technology in the studio where I can click on it, and it turns out the person who sent me the Brexit means Brexit, why don't you pay attention line is also a big Donald Trump fan and a big kind of UKIP fan. And you realise, actually, no, there is another mindset out there where Brexit means something, and I guess she was sort of hoping that there'd be rather more of them than it appears there are at the moment.
Yeah, so tactically she got it right by calling it.
Maybe.
But actually, the way that public opinion is now apparently swinging against her, she's quite fearful. She's now beginning to talk about the opportunities of Brexit. What a two-faced... Sorry, I was going to swear there.
Carry on. I believe you have to get that printed on a T-shirt. But be careful, you'll get thrown off EasyJet. It's 10:43, you're listening to Jack. Be careful. James O'Brien on LBC. Why are we having an election? Genuinely, a lot of people going down that line. I don't quite see it as clearly as Tony does and other callers, in the sense that what do these extra 2 years give her? That Mike emailed, didn't he, earlier on exactly the same theme, a 24-month reprieve and maybe a Tory miracle. So if Brexit is bad, and it's a perfectly reasonable argument to suggest that it won't be, I can't remember any of them at the moment, but I'm sure they're out there. It emerges what reality is, and we stop thinking that the colour of our passport is going to insulate us against having to renegotiate every trade deal that we've been part of since the early 1970s on individual basis with over 150 countries around the world. When reality starts to dawn, then whoever is in power, whoever is conducting the negotiations potentially has problems. Why does having 2 more years on the clock in any way mitigate those problems? Because it's just a hump that we'll get over. It's an obstacle that we'll negotiate, and then you've got 2 more years for the dust to settle, so you've got a better chance of winning in 2022 against a backdrop of reality dawning than you would in 2020 against a backdrop of reality dawning. I don't know. One thing I'd say for certain, if anybody in the Conservative High Command genuinely believed that Brexit was going to deliver quick and visible benefits after the negotiation is completed in 2019, they wouldn't have called this election. They'd want to go to the country early 2020, really, wouldn't you? As soon as you can start riding into an election on the back of the Brexit success. So regardless of where you stand on the Brexit question, why you'd want 2 more years for the dust to settle without believing that there's going to be a hell of a lot of dust is at the moment something else that's a little bit beyond me. Thank you. 10:45 is the time. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need. First up after the travel news, it's Jackie. After Jackie, it could be you. Why are we having a general election is the question. Would we be having a general election, I wonder, if they'd published the growth figures for all G7 countries a month ago instead of Canada finally registering theirs today? We've now moved, the UK has now moved to bottom of the G7 Growth League table. A year ago, I think we were at the top. I know that a year ago we were outstripping Germany, America and Japan. We just got pipped, if memory serves, by Germany towards the end of last year. But a year ago, no, February this year we got pipped by Germany, but I think a year ago we were still top. Anyway, now we're bottom. So why are we having that? You won't see that reported. Daily Mail's having an astonishing time at the moment, trying to simultaneously explain why we've had 7 years of economic miracles since 2010 and how the country has been absolutely brought to its knees by uncontrolled mass immigration. That's a bit like, you know, the old Schrodinger's immigrant coming over here to claim all our unemployment benefits while simultaneously stealing our jobs. You now have it on a national scale. Simultaneously, superb economic leadership over the course of the last 7 years, but a country brought to its knees by immigration. I got a lovely reply when I tweeted earlier from a fellow who said, I have actually been brought to my knees by immigration, James. That is the traditional way in which you do propose to the woman that you want to marry. I thought that was lovely. 10:51 is the time. Jackie is in Lightwater. Jackie, why are we having a general election?
Hello, James.
Hello,
Big fan. I'm a first-time caller.
You're very welcome, Jackie.
Your
Thank you.
thanks at 10 o'clock are getting me through this election.
Oh, bless you. You're very kind.
As an ex-cop, actually, I've done a bit of political sort of championing of victims, so I've dipped my toe into the Westminster bubble a couple of times.
Yes.
And I think quite a lot of this is due to the fact that Theresa May and the Conservatives don't really feel they have control over the House of Lords. And a lot of the legislation that they've tried to, or they've managed to get through, which is very controversial, things like the Snoopers law and things like that, have been blocked constantly and bounced back from the House of Lords. And in fact, one of the truest things, perhaps, that I've heard in the explanations from the Conservatives about why they're calling the election is that they felt frustrated by the fact that they didn't have a sufficient majority to get these things through. Now, one thing I've learned is that unless something's in their manifesto, it's unlikely they get a free ride through the House of Lords, which is why, I think that they've got things that would be controversial, like fox hunting, the dementia tax, press regulation, all that sort of thing is in the manifesto, however outrageous it may seem to us, in order for them to get a free ride through the House of Lords.
It's interesting. So again, it's not the reasons that we've been given, and it does, if not necessarily have a sinister subtext, it has a rather more serious one than some people admit.
Well, I think there's a lot of arrogance in this and ego. I mean, Theresa May's lived in the Westminster bubble pretty much all her political life, and she's campaigned in leafy Maidenhead. She's never really been challenged. She's well known for having her own little bubble of people around her. She doesn't like being exposed, and she's probably got a bit carried away being Prime Minister and being advised that, you know, you've got this huge majority in the polls. We could just about get everything through we ever wanted to do. Let's just do it. And I think she's been persuaded that that poll lead will be transferred into seats. And then we're left with probably the question that we're going to have to look at later in the week. So don't worry, your 10 o'clock should still be penciled out in the diary, at least for another week, Jackie. Because what does success look like? That's probably, we've got Mystery Hour coming up at 12. We'll probably do that tomorrow. What does success look like? Because most polls still have a 40-plus majority, but I think, we were talking pretty comfortably about 3 figures 10 days ago. So what does success look like, do you think? Well, success looks like actually winning a majority, I should think now. But
that is going to be the revisionism. That's going to be fascinating because it's all about increasing the mandate, increasing the majority, which I think all the polls suggest she's still going to do. Even the ones that actually no, all the polls except the ones that don't. But the massive majority, 5 out of 6 of them, still 40+ seats in that majority. But it was supposed to be 100+. So does that give her the big enough bounce that she believes she needs? And I still don't fully understand why she believes she needs a bounce at all. Jackie, thank you for the kind words. We were talking about policing issues yesterday. 10:54 is the time. Paul is in Chelmsford. Paul, why are we having a general election?
Well, let me be very clear that we need elections in this country because we can't get a government without an election. And if we don't have a government, we can't have elections, James. And let me just also say that radio stations are very important in telling people that we need elections to get governments.
You are channeling the Prime Minister, right? Unless I've missed something.
Let me be very, very clear that I am channeling the Prime Minister, but it is important in this day to channel the Prime Minister because the Prime Minister is very good at channeling the Prime Minister.
May I ask, Paul, in Chelmsford, what are you planning on having for your lunch today?
Let me be very clear, James, that lunch is very important to this country, and if we don't have lunches, things could go terribly wrong. So let's all pull together and have lunches.
Finally, Paul, how much do you think you might spend on your lunch today?
Let me be very clear, James, that money is not important about lunch. What is important is that lunch means lunch.
Quit while he's ahead. Come on. Gwynfor is in Port Talbot. Gwynfor, what would you like to say?
Well, the only person that knows why we're having a general election is the person who called it. And so you need to put your detective hat on, James.
Well, it's all about Brexit. Yes, that you were listening yesterday. Thank you very much. It's all about Brexit, she says. It's all about Brexit.
Well, you've got to get into the weird and wonderful, strong and stable decision-making head of Theresa May. And if you think about it, she said, on 6 occasions that we were not going to have a general election.
Categorically. She said, let me be very clear. We are definitely not going to have a general election.
Because it will create instability.
At this very potentially chaotic time.
Logically, if we're going to have a general election, then she wants to create instability. She's looking for a fall guy to blame the mess that's going to be the negotiations over Brexit. As in the programme the other day was great question. What is a good one?
Yeah, what's a bad one? What's no deal, bad deal, good deal?
Yeah, and so she's looking for. They do it all the time. Diversion tactics. What are we all talking about today? We're not talking about Tory policies. We're talking about why Theresa May didn't go to the programme last night. Their manifesto. We're not talking about the content of it. We're talking about the fact that it wasn't costed.
Well, no, but hang on 1 second. I've got a lot of time for the kind of distraction and diversion school of thought. But actually, I think it might be simpler than that. Didn't they make a very conscious decision to park their tanks on Jeremy Corbyn's lawn and make it an election of personality? I mean, I don't know near you, but the Conservative signs that people have got up near me. You have to go back and check to see whether the word Conservative is actually on the poster. It's Theresa May's team. So they made a very, very conscious decision to make it all about her and
not about her policies.
Yeah, and that has not really worked out for them.
No, it hasn't. No. But she's still going to have this, I still think that she's trying to create instability. So when it comes to Brexit, oh God, how can you describe it? I don't even think about it. Something to fall back on. It was the other parties creating too much confusion and all that sort of thing. It's ridiculous.
It does seem ridiculous, and I'm glad we did this. I thought it might be one of those hours where I kind of hung myself out to dry a little bit because people weren't going to ring in. Paul in Chelmsford, make sure he knows how much love is in the room for Paul in Chelmsford. Going for a cracking call. Thank you as well. I think this fella puts it best. Needed a good laugh. Thank God for your last caller. Let me be very clear. Your last caller is 100% classic radio. I didn't know where Paul was coming from then. I had that little moment. That's when radio's at its best, when you're just wondering, am I in on this joke or am I the butt of this joke? But I'm going to carry on, because the question is admitting so many fascinating calls. The last one from Port Talbot. Where will the next one be? Right up and down the country now, LBC. Leading Britain's conversation has rarely seemed a more accurate tagline for this radio station than it does in the run-up to the latest general election, due, of course, to unfold 1 week today, a day on which I won't be able to even acknowledge the existence of a political landscape in this country. Such are broadcasting rules. It means, though, that we will be able to have Mystery Hour. That's why we have it on Thursdays instead of Fridays, because whenever there are polls and elections, it takes care of 1 hour of programming on a day when you are not, as a news broadcaster, allowed to talk about the biggest story in the news. But it's Thursday today as well, so we'll crack on from 12 with another Mystery Hour. If you don't know what that is, you are, I suggest, a few people saying they've started listening to the programme relatively recently. You're in for a bit of a treat, but after 11, more of this. Back to the vexed question of why on earth we're having a general election at the moment. The answers are, well, multifarious, none of them particularly uplifting. There's plenty of room for a positive analysis. You know, Paul in Chelmsford, we thought he was going to provide the positive answer to the question. He told Caroline when he came on, he said, I want to tell James why it's for the good of the country that we're having this election. And then he came on and did that brilliant comedy routine. It's very hard doing this job sometimes. For example, that very sad news in the news bulletin then about the passing of Roy Barraclough, the actor. It's when John Noakes passed earlier this week, because we could get someone like Sarah Green on, we did. But I can't think off the top of my head of someone to invite on to talk about that. But I know an awful lot of people will have very, very fond memories of him as an actor. I do, not just in Coronation Street, but also, and some people, you might do a little double take now, because you might not have clocked in the past that it was actually him. But he was Les Dawson. You remember Les Dawson used to do Ida when he was the old sort of woman talking to her neighbour over the garden fence and hitching up her boobs all the time and doing that sort of face. That was him. That was Roy Barraclough. He was, what was Ida's friend called? There were two of them. Brilliant actor, and I've got a soft spot for Coronation Street and that era when he married Bette Lynch. It was something of a heyday. So Roy Barraclough, the second sort of big iconic television figure to pass this week. I just want to note it properly, mark it properly. And now we have 5 minutes after 11 is the time. Back to politics. Why are we having an election? 034 560 60973, especially after swearing blind on 5 or 6 separate occasions that we categorically and definitively, let me be very clear, would not be having one. Mervyn is in Bow. Mervyn, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. How are you?
Very well, Mervyn.
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons many people in her party advised her that as she had a commanding lead, it would be a good time to have an election.
You're not going to win any prizes for that one, Mervyn.
No, right. Other than that, she had Sturgeon, who I consider the flea on the tail of the dog trying to wag the dog, which is the UK, as the person...
that probably needs, to be fair, mate, that needs a bit of work as well.
Oh, right then. Yeah, she said she needed a mandate because she wasn't elected. So if she gets elected, she's got a mandate. That shuts her and Clegg and everybody else up. So that's that one. As far as Brexit is concerned, you want to know why Brexit means Brexit. Is that correct?
Go on.
Well, I believe that's because it means leaving the customs union, leaving the single market, and also getting control of the borders back, and getting out of the clutches of the ECJ. I know it's not part of the EU, but it's also associated, and by Brexit, we can avoid their overruling and daft human rights regulations.
How are we going to do that?
I don't think get an English Bill of Rights.
How are we going to do that?
Well, get an English Bill of Rights.
Okay. What have we got at the moment?
Well, we've got command by our courts that could be overruled by Europe.
We've got a Human Rights Act that was passed in the British Parliament.
Yeah.
You just want it to have a different name.
I call it the Human Wrongs Act because it works better for tourists and criminals, if you ask me.
Okay. I mean, I'm just sort of, for the record, I didn't. But you remember when she was trying to get Abu Qatada deported?
Yes.
And she decided...
It took 10 years.
Pardon?
It took 10 years, didn't it?
It took 3 years, because at the beginning it was pointed out that it is not British policy to allow suspects to be deported to countries on evidence that was secured through torture.
Yes, I remember that.
So when she was Home Secretary, you'll remember as well, that she was told that if we could get the government, Jordan I think in that case, to confirm that they won't use the evidence when they put him on trial that was secured through torture, then they can have him tomorrow.
Yes, I remember that.
And then she spent 3 years dancing through the pages of the Daily Mail and the Sun, at the end of which she told Jordan that if they agreed not to take evidence that had been secured through torture, they could have him tomorrow, and that's what happened. So it was 3 years, with the greatest of respect, Marvin, it was 3 years playing into the ill-informed and quite deliberately warped worldview that men like you have.
Why is it warped, James?
Well, because I've just explained to you that the Human Rights Act that you think is such a massive problem did not prevent her from doing the biggest deportation that people cite as evidence of why the Human Rights Act is a problem.
Didn't we have the same sort of problem with Abu Hansa, who eventually got banged up in America?
Again, I mean, that's got nothing to do with the European Union, our extradition deal with America.
But
otherwise we wouldn't have been able to send that other fellow.
Yeah,
but anyway, mate, you carry on by all means. What was Nicola Sturgeon again? A flea on the what was it?
I think Miss Sturgeon is a flea on the tail of the dog, which is trying to wag the dog, which is the UK.
Right. Scotland is in what?
If she throws a lot in with Corbyn and puts him in number 10,
mate,
she's going to be dictating too much.
Yeah, that's the one, Marvin. Brilliantly played. So why are we having the election again?
Well, so she's got a mandate, which
right, but mandates aren't important because Nicola Sturgeon's got the biggest mandate in the United Kingdom, but you've got precisely zero respect for her, politically speaking.
Why has she got the biggest mandate?
Well, because have a look at the seats in the Scottish Parliament.
Yeah, but they're outnumbered by the seats in this Parliament.
Oh, mate, alive. She's not in this. Nicola Sturgeon's not in this Parliament.
So why should she have a seat at the Brexit negotiations?
Why should she have a seat at the Brexit negotiations?
Yes.
Because Scotland is in the United Kingdom, Marvin.
Yeah, it's part of the United Kingdom, and we voted as a whole to leave.
We have a devolved Parliament in Scotland that represents Scottish interests. How long will it be, do you think? Because you've clearly been successfully persuaded that Scots are your enemies, but I'm presuming you don't like European Union migrants much either.
I'm not saying Scots are our enemies. I'm saying that the SNP is our enemy. No, the SNP is our enemy.
But you're a big fan of mandates.
What mandate?
Oh, mate. Yeah. Democracy, eh? Nick's in East Grinstead. Nick, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
Thanks
Nick.
for taking the call.
You're very welcome.
I'm sort of got a view on this Theresa May calling the election. I think it's actually the opposite end of the spectrum. Everybody tends to think that she wants a stronger mandate to be able to negotiate from a position of strength. I think it's the opposite. I think that she knows that Brexit is going to be defining for her and her legacy. She's a very experienced politician. She's thought this one all through. She knows that any deal she brings back to Parliament is going to have its critics because it's going to be full of warts and goodness knows what else is going to
from almost every angle, from people who want to stay in the European Union right through to people who want to cut both our arms off instead of just one of them.
Exactly. So she's going to bring back a rag bag of stuff that's going to be very difficult. I think she needs a majority to be able to take a bad deal through Parliament because no deal is a no-no. She knows she's going to end up with
no deal is the worst deal of all. If we define a good deal as something that's better than what we've currently got, there is no such thing as a good deal because there's no earthly way we're going to be allowed to come away with something better than the people still in currently enjoy. Right. So it's bound to be a bad deal, and to get a bad deal through Parliament, she needs
a big majority.
How big?
Because I don't know, maybe 70 or 80 probably.
Or I mean, that's already come down from the projections of 10 days ago, but big enough to absorb a fairly weighty backbench rebellion, whether it's a backbench rebellion saying, please don't drive off this cliff, or whether it's a backbench rebellion saying, drive faster, drive faster, drive faster. Both constituencies of which are represented within the Parliamentary Conservative Party.
Exactly. And she's going to have to... she's going to have to take it through because if she doesn't, if it falls out, we end up leaving the EU because of that. She's going to be, on the scrap heap of politicians, isn't she? She's got one chance to do this, to make something for herself.
And just briefly, what would that look like? It would look like getting any deal through Parliament.
Well, I guess, it's going to be a very complex deal. It's going to be very difficult for the deal to be described without reference to the specifics of every characteristic and component of that deal.
I know, you know,
and
I know.
Actually, marshalling that through Parliament is going to be...
And that is why the bigger the... So it's nothing to do with her negotiating position in Brussels and everything to do with her legislating ability in London.
Exactly. It's the back end of the process. It's not the front end. It's not going into this with a stronger mandate to be tougher and and more demanding in the initial negotiation. It's dealing with the fallout at the back end that she's worried about.
Yeah, I think that's pretty close to, I mean, pretty close to the best we're going to get. The consensus, though, also allows the suggestion that she's deliberately trying to lose because she knows it's going to be so tricky. I like the way you acknowledge her knowledge that it's going to be incredibly tricky, but getting it through Parliament, for good or for ill, is going to depend on having a bigger majority. And the reason why she's going to need a bigger majority to get it through Parliament is that whatever the deal is, a hell of a lot of people aren't going to like it. Whether it's the people who will still be sitting there waiting for their magic unicorn to be delivered to their doorstep that morning, or whether it's the people who now claim, yes, I knew full well I was going to be demonstrably worse off, James. I deliberately voted for sovereignty because I quite like being poor. What was it Michael Caine said? A multimillionaire about, I'd rather be a poor servant, a poor master than a rich servant, or something like that. I mean, everyone is going to be disappointed, potentially. People who want to stay are going to be disappointed. People who think that by leaving we'll be able to start deporting our neighbours for being the wrong colour, they're going to be disappointed. People who think that we're going to have some sort of brave new world of trade deals with countries that would much rather do trade deals with the biggest trading bloc in the world than with us, they're going to be disappointed. Everyone's going to be disappointed. How the hell is she going to get that through Parliament? Let me be very clear. It's going to be tricky. I've got some phone lines free. As Nick goes, you can grab the one that he's just vacated, 03456060973. Light relief coming up from 12, some light relief already. Mervyn unintentionally, Paul in Chelmsford very intentionally, but I've got time for 45 minutes more of your answers to this question, okay? Why are we having a general election? And now I will move it on, and I reserve the right to return to this question tomorrow or next week, any day except Thursday, when we're not allowed to talk about the election that will actually be happening. What will success look like now, okay? Right, I'm going to try and deal in objectivities. It was supposed to be, or all of the signs were, a three-figure majority, over 100. One of the biggest majorities in a long time, okay? That was not just the prediction, I think it was the expectation behind the decision to go to the country. It may still happen, okay? I'm in the business of talking about politics because I love talking about politics, and it sometimes means perhaps that we veer to the extremities. Could easily still happen, a three-figure majority. Ladbrokes reports today that the projections have become below that figure for the first time, but 5 out of 6 of the polling companies still report a majority in excess of 40 seats. In many ways, fans of irony would probably like to see the majority remain exactly where it was, in which case the entire general election becomes the mother of all red herrings. And then you have that projection from YouGov yesterday that suggests a hung parliament. So there's all sorts of things that could happen and that you could predict happening with the support of some of the psephology, some of the research. But what I like about this is if you've been listening to this with a fairly grim sense of dismay, you've sort of been thinking, especially listening to people like Charlotte in Putney, dyed-in-the-wool Conservative supporters who are absolutely frustrated. One MP actually quoted yesterday in the most Anglo-Saxon of terms about what he saw going on at the heart of the campaign. Reports this morning that Lynton Crosby, the kind of master of the dark arts from Australia, is now in total control of the campaign. Everybody answers to him except the Prime Minister herself. So everyone kind of agreeing that things haven't gone brilliantly. What would constitute a good result? If you like, the lowest level at which you could call it a success rather than a holding tactic or a failure or a disaster or, you know, a kind of fairly ambivalent result. What's the lowest point at which it would be a success and why? But before that, I still want more answers to the question of why you think we're having a general election. And if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. And it is a question we probably should have asked sooner, although it's taken a sort of aligning of the planets to give this question a sense of urgency. And that question is, why are we having a general election? 03456060973. And of course, the silent word at the end of that question is now. Or indeed, if you want to insert a few more words, when we don't have to have one. Why are we having a general election now? Why are we having a general election when we don't have to have one? Especially given that the looming Brexit negotiations that start in about 10 days after the election finishes would presumably, for most of us, be in the forefront of our minds if we were in charge of conducting them. But no, we're having a general election instead. Why? 03455. Stop saying the number. I ain't got no phone lines free. I'll talk to Jack and Ian, and then maybe you can grab one of the lines that they're currently occupying. Jack first. He's in Emsworth. Jack, why are we having a general election now?
Oh, hi, James. I love the show. I agree with pretty much what everyone else has said so far in that she thought she was going to win so easily, May, that why not call it? Get another 4 years free of charge, pretty much. But the thing that I always concern myself with is once they win, she probably thought, right, that's my mandate to do whatever the hell I like. I've then got the will of the people on my side. So that when it comes around and actually she stops spending on the infrastructure and, we haven't got the money to do things because Brexit's affected the economy, she can then say, well, hang on a minute, you voted for it. You voted for it not only at the referendum, voted me back in as well. And, we're then in for another 4 years of the Tories being in charge.
And if anyone says, yeah, but hang on a minute, you never told us this was going to happen, you just put your fingers in your ears and shout really loudly, you lost, get over it, stop being such a snowflake or something like that.
Strong and stable. Strong and stable.
Strong and stable. And so the only question I'd ask you under that analysis is, Corbyn's graphs were not moving in the direction they're moving in now. If she'd stayed stum and stayed put, the Labour Party might have started eating itself from the inside out. So arguably she could have been in a stronger position a year or two down the line, but we'd be knee-deep in the Brexit negotiations.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, there's no right answer for it, is there? I think a different point of view is, had Brexit not happened, actually Corbyn may have been in more of a position of strength, in my view, because he's on kind of mid-20s, and undeniably at my age, there's a lot of people who support him, a lot of young people who don't like what the Tories have been doing, and actually Brexit is now a defining issue. I probably won't vote for Corbyn, I'll probably vote Lib Dem because I don't want to leave, and
sure.
They're the only party that are genuinely offering me something of not leaving. So it's hugely difficult for the whole thing.
Why do you think the Lib Dems have failed to cut through so well? They've done pretty poorly, only according to the numbers, but the numbers are all we've got to go by. And as you say, that was the only maypole around which people passionately hoping that the country will still sort of put the brakes on and go into reverse on leaving the European Union. People like you, Jack. I thought that they'd all be dancing around that maypole, and they're not. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, as did I. I think there's a sense that there's probably quite a few people out there who have genuinely accepted it and just said, right, no, we've got to move on, we've got to be done with this. But then the other side of it is actually, I don't know. If Clegg was leader, you've got something.
If a pre-tuition fees Clegg was leader,
exactly right. He had a generation of voters that he could have mopped up had he not essentially screwed the students when he was in power.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden we've got these people under 30, I'd say, who generally speaking are lost for a political.
People under 30. Try 45-year-olds. They're lost for a political home at the moment. There's plenty of us around, but you are very charitably, in classic Liberal Democrat fashion, you are avoiding saying that it's the negativity argument. Tim Farron's just not cut the mustard.
Yeah.
Sorry for forcing you into that. Jack, there you go. 25 minutes after 11 is the time. And, you see, watching last night, weirdly, I didn't see all of it, but in terms of who emerged best, Farron didn't actually have a bad night last night, but I thought Caroline Lucas was streets ahead. And then the Scott Natt guy had a fairly good innings. The two main party leaders, if they had been there, but one of them a surrogate, one of them the leader of the Labour Party, I don't think they'd have made it into the top three, would they, if you were judging it objectively, if we were doing it like Strictly Come Dancing? 25 minutes after 11 is the time. Ian is in Red Hill. Ian, why are we having an election? What's going on?
Well, James, I'm really nervous about the whole thing, actually, and I haven't heard anyone say this. I've not been listening that much this week.
Why not?
Apologies.
Why not?
But,
hang on. Why not?
Work and stress, mate.
Oh, I don't want to add to the stress.
But I'll tell you why I'm stressed, though. I'm stressed about this whole situation and this general election, really, and the whole Brexit thing and everything. And I say that as someone who voted to leave. Okay. Now, I do truly believe that Theresa May currently has sent this general election out to the public purely because she wants to lose. And that might sound crazy, but I've got to take it really back to basics.
You're not alone, by the way, if you haven't been listening. That has emerged, oddly, as quite a popular theory from all manner of different perspectives. But I'd like to hear your reason. I'd like to see your working.
Okay, my workings on this are, you know as well as I do, and I didn't vote. I know you've got your reasons for saying why people voted to leave, but that wasn't the reason that I voted. Okay, mine were very, very different.
Sure.
And they were actually based on interviews that I'd seen and speeches that I'd seen by Jean-Claude Juncker.
Okay,
so
fair
that were my decisions.
Yes.
Now, I would like to say, if I could vote again, I'd vote to stay.
Yes. That's because you're honest and intelligent.
Yeah, well, and we've made a big balls up,
Yes.
apologies, but we really have, and it's getting worse and worse. And I say that because I'm self-employed as well.
Sure.
And I've seen everything settle down and then go quite quiet. It's worrying.
And it hasn't
So
really
anyway,
even started yet either. But
no, absolutely,
I don't want to add to your stresses.
which is the biggest concern. Yeah. So what we've got is a situation where I think as well as I do, no matter what Theresa May goes and tries to negotiate, it's going to be a worse deal. All right, and all of these sound bites that are out there about no deal's a good deal, no deal's a bad deal, whatever, no deal's not an option, whatever it is. I'll be honest with you. The long and short of it is she's not going to come back with any sort of deal whatsoever that's going to be any good to anybody. That's the long and short of it from the way I see it. And if you were the leader of the country, would you want to put yourself in that situation, or would you want to just stand back and go, tell you what, we know we're going to win anyway, so we'll put one out there, but we don't really want to win, so crikey, we're doing too well. Do whatever we can to make us sound and look really, really bad, and and not for everyone else, because we really, really, really don't want to be at the top of the table when they come up and go, "What the hell have you done?"
You know what? This is weird, because we were talking about the passing of Roy Barraclough, the former Coronation Street star. I heard it for the first time in the 11 o'clock news. So a few people have sent me pictures of him doing his stuff with Les Dawson. You remember when they used to play the old women doing it over the garden wall? And the fly in the ointment of your theory comes to me today, Ian, via the late Les Dawson.
Go on.
So, here's the thing. My mum is very good at the piano, right? And she is also, we were all big fans of Les Dawson growing up. And you remember when he used to do his comedy piano playing?
Yeah.
He'd get his grand piano and he'd have his tails on and he'd just hit the occasional wrong note. And for some reason, it was comedy gold when Les Dawson played the piano brilliantly badly. My mum swears blind that it is harder to do that than it is to play the piano correctly. To get those mistakes so perfectly timed and so perfectly inserted into the otherwise accurate recital. And he was a virtuoso pianist. And my mum's point, he would absolutely have to be to sound that good at being bad.
Absolutely. Torben Dean at the Olympics, wasn't it? One of those.
Yeah, precisely. Now, you are essentially crediting Theresa May with being so brilliant at political manoeuvring that she can play the wrong notes in exactly the right place, just as Les Dawson did on the piano.
But the thing is, we're such a fickle public, James, that she doesn't have to play them in the right place, does she? That's the thing.
Yes.
And we are, and that's the problem. And the other bit of the problem is, we've got a general election coming up. I really want to vote, but I actually don't want to vote for anybody because I don't trust any of them now. I really don't. And I think that is a big problem that we've got, and I don't know how we're going to turn it around. I really, really don't. But there should be I would like at the general election another tick box to say, don't want to vote for any of these. And actually, now we know the facts, or we know more of the facts. Can we have another vote on Europe, please?
Yeah, or even just like do your worst, do the deal, do your best, do your worst, do anything, do the deal, show us what the deal is, and then give us, some detail on what it involves, and let us, as a Leave voter, let's stress that again, just to have another go, just to have another chance. Now that we've had a look over the cliff edge or a look over the rainbow, whichever you think it is, you just vote with some information and some knowledge and some evidence. But hey, Ian, great stuff, mate. In fact, so good I'm late for the news. It's 11:31. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we have a simple question before us. What is, or why are we having a general election? And the answers so far, well, they haven't exactly been uplifting, have they? But they have been a myriad. Our political editor, Theo Usherwood, is here to bring us up to speed with developments in the election campaigns that have unfolded while we have been enjoying each other's company.
Jeremy Corbyn is speaking this afternoon, James, and he's going to be speaking on Brexit in Essex, and he is going to be ruling out, because we've got the advanced words, a no-deal option. Remember, Theresa May talked about the idea of a no-deal. If we can't get what we want from the European Union, we'll simply walk away, revert to World Trade Organization tariffs, create this Singapore-style economy on the edges of the European Union with a low corporation tax, attract large corporations to the UK because, okay, they're going to have to pay the tariffs to access the European Union, but they'll make that back with low taxes. And of course, that has implications for welfare spending and the NHS. Jeremy Corbyn is saying that if he's Prime Minister, that option is going to be taken off the table. That's not going to simply exist. The argument, of course, and the retort, of course, from the Tories is that by doing that, you lose any leverage that you might have over the European Union. The 27 other leaders simply don't think that you have the ability to...
It's important to stress the balance on this one, actually, because both theories hold water.
Yes.
Economic game theory suggests that you raise the prospect of walking away because it focuses the mind of your negotiating partners. But Ian Dunt, who I find a very helpful guide to matters Brexit, he suggests that it's a bit like standing on a cliff edge with your mate and saying to your mate, if you don't give me your sandwich, I'm going to jump. And your mate says, all right then.
It's a little bit like that, yes. The issue for the Tories is saying, what the Tories are raising, is that you need to be able to hold something over the 27 other leaders. And if you don't have this option to walk away, then what do you have?
Yes.
And perhaps it might, a critic of the Conservative position might say to you that actually it just underscores the weakness of our position going into these negotiations, because if that's all we can hold over our European Union partners, then it's going to be difficult and testy in these negotiations. Anyway, Jeremy Corbyn is saying he's not going to have a no deal, and of course the Conservative retort to that is, well, by doing that you hand the advantage to the likes of Donald Tusk and Michel Barnier and Guy Verhofstadt, who are going to be around the negotiating table, because they can simply say, well, this is what you're going to have, take it, and you're not going to leave, so take it.
Yes.
In other news,
which again, it makes it all binary, doesn't it? As if well, there's two things that are going to happen now. One we predicted yesterday, which is people, the more how can we put this politely, the more ruddy-cheeked of the Brexiteers will start claiming that the effectiveness in negotiations of Barnier or Merkel, or whoever, the fact that they're going to be quite good at defending the interests of their members, that they'll start holding that up as a really powerful proof of why we've done the right thing in insisting on not being members anymore. So that will be one of the next stages of the debates. And the other one will be that it genuinely is in both parties' interests to come to some sort of agreement. And yet this idea that, well, we'll walk away if we don't get what we want, that sets it off on a potentially rather negative and combative foot. I don't know whether or not it has to be negative and combative, but all of my instincts and what knowledge I have suggests that it doesn't. Once the inevitability is accepted, which it hasn't been yet. In Germany, there's a lot of people who still think, in their words, they would say, of course they're going to come to their senses. They can't carry on this epic road of self-destruction. Once they realise we really are going to have to probably carry it on right to the bitter end, then perhaps there'll be a more cooperative air, which we're in danger of poisoning before it's even started.
There are two things from the European point of view which says that actually, from their point of view, people talk about a punishment Brexit. They don't want to give us a good deal. The first is on the money, the divorce deal. They've drawn up their funding that runs through to 2019-2020, and when we leave, and that funding goes, so you have a black hole in the European Union budgets, and that has to be filled, and if it's not going to be filled by Britain, then it has to be filled by the 27 remaining states, and they don't want to be worse off because of it. And of course, the other aspect of this, James, is that when they look at it, they don't want to, likes of Michel Barnier, Donald Tusk, they don't want to give the impression that it's just really easy, because then the European Union, the project falls to bits, because lots of people put up their hands and say, well, actually, we want to leave as well. Theresa May, her whole pitch, and we're going to hear from her later on today, is that because she's a strong and stable leader, and because she has the authority, she can walk into the room, and while previous negotiations, David Cameron, remember, back in February last year, have failed, she can get a good deal. But The Economist today, that's some might say a fanzine for the liberal metropolitan elite, has come out in support.
No, they wouldn't. The Economist is a journal of note for people who understand economics, probably the most respected and august organ in the world.
I was
you're too young to start doing that. It's like wearing a bow tie.
Sorry.
You'll start doing it ironically.
Sorry.
I can see this happening, can't you? Theo's the kind of guy who's going to start wearing a bow tie ironically because he's in his 30s and it's funny, and then suddenly 20 years will go by and you'll just be the old fat bloke in a bow tie, mate.
Right,
Don't start
get back in my box.
Thank you. The Economist is not some liberal. The Economist is academic rigor.
I was just.
Anyway, what have they done?
Sorry. Right. Anyway, they come out. Get back in my box.
I like the bow tie, by the way.
Okay. Okay, right. This is their editorial. They've come out for the Lib Dems today, and it's fairly damning on Theresa May. And it says there are doubts about her leadership. She relies on a closed circle of advisors with an insular outlook and little sense of how the economy works. It does not bode well for the Brexit talks. A campaign meant to cement her authority feels like one in which she has been found out. They describe a vote for the Lib Dems as a down payment on the future if the centres of the Tory party, centre-right part of the Tory party and the centre-right part of the Labour Party unite to form a new party. That's fairly damning from The Economist. Just on the numbers and how this plays into the Brexit talks and Theresa May's leadership, because people are starting to talk about it now, the permutations. We've had that YouGov poll, which says that there could be a hung parliament. Different people I've spoken to are cautious about it. It's worth remembering, and I'll say this, and I'm not relating this directly to YouGov, but elections...
That's YouGov as in the polling organisation. It's not Theo addressing me in the style of a taxi driver.
No. YouGov is... Elections are places where for pollsters to trade their wares, to put forward what they can offer, because really where they make their money is with private clients, helping them understand their audiences or customer base.
Very helpful, a lot of people won't realise that.
So that's not the election isn't where they make their money. So they're looking for YouGov needs to be right on this, because if they're right on it, they're way out of sync with other polling companies.
Which is an explanation that also gives the lie to people who sometimes, with some justification, think that various individual polling companies operate in the interests of various political positions. So the YouGov have done this on purpose in order to mobilise all the Tories who don't think they're going to need to vote because they're going to romp home. That would be commercially damaging to YouGov.
Absolutely. It's a very, very competitive market. If you ring up and commission a poll, you can usually barter them down, because there's 7 or 8 of them of equal standing, and they are good at what they I would put that in there. And I just make that point. YouGov, if they've got this one right, will be way ahead of the game on, and their clients will then come to them and say, well, this was right. Just on the numbers, if Theresa May's majority is under 30, and this is from speaking to Tories, she's in big trouble.
Right. 30's the ceiling, or the basement.
30. If her majority is 30, because everybody turns around and they'll ring you.
Why have we done this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why did we need a general election? Because she said she needed to cement her mandate, and she will have failed in that task. We're starting at 7.
30's lower than I think they would have said a week ago. Was there some expectation management going on already, or not? Or not?
No. I think that when you go back 3 weeks and you're saying that the talk was they're going to have a majority of more than 100.
Still may.
So 30, if they're under 30, then there is an issue. 30 to 50, it's going to be tough for her to get through the Brexit negotiations, because that's broadly the rump of Eurosceptics within her own party, that when she brings that deal back to the floor of the House of Commons could cause serious trouble and unite with Remainers to basically thwart any deal that the Prime Minister
might have. Which is just bizarrer and again this ludicrous binary question put before completely unqualified people like me assumes even more potential negative impact. But this, just to make sure I understand it correctly, all the sort of people who are absolutely certain that they know exactly what's going on but haven't got the guts to ring into the programme, who say things like, well, she's obviously doing it to strengthen her mandate because we don't want a soft Brexit and we go, they're the ones that, as ever, have completely missed the point, because the mandate needs to be strengthened to stop sabotage by people who want to leave the European Union with both arms removed rather than essentially just one.
Exactly. So the Eurosceptic wing of the party is roughly 30 to 50. They're the ones who will cut off both your arms to prevent.
Just to stress, because they think it'll make us better at swimming.
And that's their prerogative to do so. And that's the particular issue. The other issue, and this came out with the social care reforms when the story first came out, is that with a much larger majority, you can implement a domestic policy in the same way that Tony Blair did from 1997 onwards.
You can do bold stuff.
Exactly.
And whether it's good or bad is immaterial, it's bold.
And when you look back at the previous 12 months of Theresa May's prime ministerialship, she has been, whether it's on grammar schools, Brexit's difficult, she's coming up, every time she wants to do something, she's coming up against the wall on her own side. And if you can create a larger majority, you have you insulate yourself from that. More than 50, of course, she's got away with it. 80 plus, great result, and they're back to being invincible again. But there is an issue with the Conservative campaign because there's a feeling that there have been too many people at the top of the campaign, mixed messages. I've had mixed messages from people about exactly what they're trying to sell.
I haven't had any. I've just got yours second hand.
And yeah, it's not been a great campaign for the Conservatives.
Well, it's far from over. A week is a long time in politics. Oh, write that down. That's pithy. Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, covering himself in glory once again. You know he's nursing an injury at the moment as well. What do you mean?
Don't.
I think people should know.
No.
Well, I think yesterday when you broadcast onto the programme, you contributed to the programme while hobbling. Genuinely hobbling.
Hobbled up Eltham High Street.
You twisted your ankle and you damaged a tendon. I mean, ordinarily, people would take time off. I know you are, but people would normally take time off. I just want them to register your commitment to the cause. Some of these listeners won't realise.
Yeah, but my mum might be listening. She's not worried.
She won't worry. She's all right.
Well, look, if she is,
I'll keep an eye on him like I always do.
Fine.
All right. God bless. It's 11:46. And what a fruitful morning. I thought we might be talking about something else in the second hour of the programme, but I'm going to conclude that hour asking the same question I asked at the outset, with a switchboard still. Every minute someone on it hangs up at the end of a conversation, there's a dozen people vying to get that slot. So we're going to leave some people disappointed, for which I apologise, but nothing will stand in the way of mystery on a day like today. The sun is out. Time for a smile. That will crack on from 12. What is the question we're asking? You may be wondering if you've just tuned in for Mystery Hour and generally don't bother listening to the rest of the programme, which I don't find insulting at all, by the way. The question that we've been asking is, why are we having a general election? And then you can add whatever subclauses you want to that question. Why are we having a general election when the person that called it swore blind on several occasions that we wouldn't? Why are we having a general election when we categorically don't need to have one? Why are we having a general election? Why are we having a general election now? Tim is in Rushlake Green. Tim, why are we having a general election?
Well, simple, mate, isn't it? It's to give her a mandate. She doesn't have a popular mandate at the moment, and she faced criticism for that from day one of becoming Prime Minister. Gordon Brown faced similar criticism in 2007 and was seriously thinking about going to the country. Probably should have done.
A mandate for what?
A mandate as Prime Minister. So she's got to...
But then we're left with the question of why she insisted severally that she absolutely wasn't going to call a general election. So she rejects your answer, not me.
No, I take that point, but
it's not a point.
As any politician, well, circumstances change, and I do actually believe.
Well, that's where my question comes from. Actually, so it's not simple at all. Well, what circumstances have changed?
Circumstances are that we had a referendum. I was a passionate Remainer, I really was, but we lost. We are where we are. She was a Remainer. She now has to present this.
No, but what circumstances have changed since... No, because you've misunderstood my question. My apologies.
Okay,
what circumstances have changed since she insisted severally that she didn't need to call a general election?
Answer, James.
Well, it doesn't start with the referendum, does it? It starts with her becoming Prime Minister.
It does. I completely accept that. It does. I think what has changed is that she didn't realise how difficult it was going to be, that people wouldn't accept the result of the referendum. You've got the Liberal Democrats who are pledged to another referendum. You have a leader of the Labour Party who almost certainly voted to leave. If you haven't read Tim Shipman's book on the referendum, do. It's absolutely brilliant.
I think you'll find I reviewed it for the Times Literary Supplement.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yes.
Really, really good. Really good book. But I think what has changed is she didn't realise how complicated it was going to be, as simple as that. So she has to sit...
But then she's not doing that. So the mandate's a blind mandate, because an awful lot of people chomping at the bit saying, yes...
I think it is. Yeah,
they're saying, I need a mandate to deliver what's essentially going to be quite bad, but I'm still pretending it's going to be quite good, because to do otherwise would be electoral suicide.
What else can she do, James?
That's the question.
What else can she do?
That's the question.
Well, what has she got to go in with? I think my own view is that, we've got a very, very short time to negotiate this. 2 years is nothing. Nobody ever thought Article 50 was going to be triggered, so not a lot of thought was given to it. And when that 2 years expires, unless they extend it, and it takes all 27 to vote for that, that's not going to happen.
They have offered.
Then we're out.
If we are.
So
God.
I think, I'm afraid, it's one of these circumstances where you just have to put your best team forward and tell them to do the best they can. And she's going
while also insisting that they absolutely mustn't tell the truth. So you see, I can come with you on this bit. Put the best team forward to negotiate the best available deal without admitting to all the people who support you that actually the best available deal is by definition going to be worse than the deal we've already got.
Possibly, but that's where we are.
I know. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
To be fair, she didn't vote for that, did she? She is trying to implement something that she didn't want, but as country leader, she's got to do it. And I think actually she's probably better placed to do it than somebody who voted to leave, because I think these people are seriously hacked off with us. And at least she has the benefit of being able to say, look, guys, this isn't what I wanted. You know it's not what I wanted, but here I am. I've got to front this up. And I think that, the biggest chink in her armour in this negotiation is going to be the accusation, who voted for you? You have not been appointed in a popular mandate. And when you said back towards 11 o'clock, which is what caused me to ring in, I'm going to be late for the dentist.
Oh, I'm sorry. What time's your appointment? 2:30?
Midday, but don't worry. When you said at the back sort of towards 11 o'clock that if she came back with a similar majority or even less or a hung parliament, then the whole thing's a red herring. No, it's not. The difference is that she has a popular mandate. Now, if she loses the election, that's something else.
Just a very personal mandate, even if the majority isn't in. It's a view, and I'm glad that you. I won't detain you any longer because you've got a molar that needs attention, Tim. Clearly, but I don't know that she would be personally strengthened if the majority is exactly the same. Maybe in our eyes she might be, but in the eyes of the Parliamentary Conservative Party, I think the opposite will be true. I mean, since you. Put that call in. The conversation I've had with Theo Usherwood has put some numbers on it, with the idea of 30 to 50 being dodgy for her, lower than 30 being absolutely bad news for her, and then anything upwards of that being a result. But I think somewhere between the two polls probably the truth lies. Tim, thank you so much. 11:57 is the time. I can squeeze in one more. Steve is in Worcester. Lovely part of the world. Steve, what have you got?
Yeah, good morning, James. Good to speak with the voice of sanity and reason.
Yeah, this is just a filtered call set up by Caroline. It's all a stooge. I'm actually related to Steve. Carry on, Steve.
Yeah, I think one thing Theresa May has realised, it's unlikely the EU exit talks are going to be completed by March 2019.
Oh, yeah.
So she'd either have to ask for an extension, or there could be transition arrangements in some areas. So that would mean we'd still be under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice.
Yeah.
We might still have freedom of movement, which would be terrible for her having an election in 2020.
Because everyone will be chomping at the bit without evidence or reason. They'll just be furious that Brexit hasn't meant all the things they thought it was going to mean.
It hasn't, and she hasn't carried out her promises that she said. Brexit means Brexit, we'll be out of this, we'll be out of that, we'll have a deal or whatever. And even if we have no deal, some of these things could still come to occur.
So it's another reality dawns scenario that you're giving. When reality dawns on the country about what is and what is not actually feasible. Now, you can be rude at this point, as I enjoy being, and say when people don't get their magic unicorn delivered to their front door in March 2019, the fallout's going to be huge. So she is simply just trying to kind of give herself a longer run up and more wriggle room when that day dawns, when that reality bites.
Yeah, precisely. Also, on the other conversation, if she goes back with a majority of, say, 18 or 20, she's finished.
Yeah, well, that
continue as Prime Minister.
You wouldn't have thought so, would you? And then what happens, mate?
Well, then, I read somewhere the other day that someone's put £2,000 on Boris Johnson at 1,000 to 1, or 100 to 1, to be Prime Minister by the 1st of July.
200 grand in the bang if it comes off. That is, well, nice work if you can get it. 11:59 is the time, and I can say one thing about Boris Johnson. He certainly won't ever lose the ambition to hold the top job. Whether or not the country shares it on a scale that it may have done in the past, we may well find out one day. I do not know. Steve, cracking stuff. Lovely contribution. In fact, what a banging couple of hours that was. My apologies to Michael, who's in Florence, Adam in Reading, Leshmi, Sam, we've got loads of people to say sorry to, Malcolm, and then various residents of Ipswich for some reason are flashing on the screen. Mystery Hour next.